She thought my credentials gave her the keys to brilliance. They gave her career suicide. I watched her build a presentation on 7 files of pure fiction. Then, I watched the implosion from the best seat in the house. This is how I used patience and precision to dismantle someone who tried to erase my existence. My name is Julian Vance. For 12 years, I have been the silent engine behind every successful campaign at Horizon Strategy Group. 48 years old, single, and according to my annual reviews, technically exceptional but lacking charisma for client-facing roles. Translation, he does everything, but we cannot imagine him schmoozing at cocktail parties. I have spent more than a decade fixing disasters that would sink careers. When the Kensington account collapsed because someone approved creative concepts without legal clearance, they called me at midnight on a Saturday. Fixed it by dawn. When our pharmaceutical client discovered their entire ad campaign violated federal guidelines, I rewrote 6 months of messaging in 72 hours. Nobody asked how I pulled it off. They just added it to their portfolios and ordered celebratory drinks. Being invisible means you observe everything. I have watched 25-year-old influencers present my frameworks to executives. I have attended strategy sessions where my solutions were pitched word for word by people who could not defend a single assumption behind them. 5 times I have been passed over for creative director positions. The feedback never changed. Julian needs to develop his interpersonal skills. Reality, Julian does not play tennis with the founder's nephew. Horizon Strategy occupies the top 4 floors of a renovated warehouse in downtown Portland. Our workspace screams boutique agency trying desperately. Edison bulbs everywhere, reclaimed wood desks and cold brew on tap. The kind of place where everyone discusses authenticity and innovation, then panics when the presentation software freezes. My office sits at the end of a corridor on the 2nd floor, wedged between the print room and emergency exit. The isolation suits me perfectly. Nobody wanders by accidentally. Everything shifted when we landed Zenith Athletics. $35 million to rebrand their entire product line and launch a digital ecosystem for their 900 retail locations. The type of project that defines careers, gets written up in industry publications, and wins awards. Naturally, I expected to be buried in strategy development, doing actual work while someone else took center stage. This time felt different. During our kickoff session, our founder, Oliver Thorne, specifically mentioned my name. Julian will be critical to this project's success, he said, making direct eye contact. His strategic insight is precisely what Zenith needs. For a moment, I believed this might finally be my opportunity. I started drafting campaign architectures, building team frameworks, and imagining myself presenting to Zenith's board. I should have recognized the pattern. That same week, Human Resources announced a major recruitment win. They had stolen a rising star from our primary competitor, someone who would transform our client relationships. The announcement included a professional photograph of a woman who looked like she had walked out of a startup promotional video. Perfect smile, confident posture, the kind of polished presence that screams, never debugged anything at 3 in the morning. Her name was Clara Montgomery, and she was about to become my nightmare. Clara Montgomery arrived on a Wednesday morning like a hurricane in designer boots. 31 years old, a master of business administration from a top university, and a resume that read like advertising mythology. She had allegedly saved 3 dying brands, led digital transformations at 2 major companies, and somehow found time to keynote a conference about disruptive thinking and brand strategy. The entire office was buzzing before she had finished onboarding. Oliver introduced her during our morning all-hands meeting. Clara will be spearheading our Zenith Athletics engagement, he announced, while Clara stood radiating the confidence that comes from never having your concept rejected in a live pitch. She brings innovative perspective and proven client success. Then, almost casually, Julian will be handling all strategic development, research, and technical execution. Handling. That word that means everything and nothing simultaneously. It meant I would do the thinking while Clara did the talking. It meant my name might appear in footnote-sized text on slide 73 of the final deck. It meant another year as the invisible architect while someone else collected accolades. Clara found me that afternoon. She did not knock. People like Clara never knock. You must be Julian, she said, flashing that startup founder smile. I have heard you are the strategic genius around here. The compliment felt manufactured, like something extracted from a leadership manual about managing technical teams. She leaned against my doorframe, occupying space like she had purchased it. I am excited to collaborate. I have some disruptive ideas about the Zenith project that will revolutionize their market position. I smiled politely, playing the supportive colleague. Internally, I was calculating how many hours I would lose correcting her disruptive ideas. It began subtly. Julian, could you send me the competitive analysis for Zenith's West Coast markets? Then, I need the consumer psychographic study by close of business. No please, no thank you. Just expectation. By week 2, she was forwarding client inquiries with only handled this typed at the top. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday at 5:47 in the evening. I was deep into building a complex brand positioning framework when Clara burst through my door. I need your login credentials for the Zenith project folders, she stated. Not requested, stated. I am assembling a preliminary presentation for the client and need immediate access. Those folders contain working documents, I replied carefully. They are not client-ready, she waved dismissively. I understand what I am doing. I just need to pull some frameworks for Friday's checkpoint. Email me the credentials. Then she vanished, leaving only expensive perfume and entitlement. I sat motionless, staring at my monitor. 12 years of being overlooked, watching my work vanish into other people's highlight reels, and being told I was not leadership material while leaders presented my strategies. Something inside me crystallized. Not anger. Anger burns too hot too fast. This was colder, sharper. This was precision. I created a new folder, Zenith Final Deliverables JV. My initials are barely noticeable at the end. Inside, I began crafting something special. Not lies, exactly. That would be too obvious. Instead, I built beautiful, professional-looking strategies that were subtly, catastrophically flawed. Brand positioning based on outdated consumer research. Market segmentation using inverted demographic logic. Campaign concepts that would alienate their core audience. Media plans with budget allocations that made no financial sense. Messaging frameworks that contradicted everything for which Zenith stood. Each file looked impeccable. Polished graphics, compelling narratives, and data that seemed authoritative, but underneath, every recommendation would lead Zenith directly into disaster. The email to Clara was concise. Here are the credentials for the Zenith folders. The files in Zenith Final Deliverables should have everything required. I hit send at exactly 6 o'clock, then archived a copy to my personal backup. The trap was armed. Now I simply waited. Creating those dummy files felt like composing a symphony of controlled chaos. Each one needed to be perfect in its imperfection, professional enough to pass casual inspection, flawed enough to detonate under scrutiny. I spent evenings after Clara left, usually around 6:30, crafting my masterpieces. File 1, Brand Positioning Strategy. The framework gleamed with strategic models and positioning maps, colors perfectly calibrated to impress. But the core positioning targeted suburban retirees for a brand that primarily sold to urban professionals. The research citations were real, but cherry-picked from studies that contradicted current trends. File 2, Campaign Creative Brief. Beautiful mood boards and creative direction, except I had based the entire emotional approach on consumer segments that Zenith had explicitly moved away from 4 years ago. The tone would feel completely disconnected from their brand identity. File 3, Media Allocation Plan. This one was my personal favorite. I used accurate media costs, but allocated budgets inverse to actual audience presence. Massive spending on platforms where Zenith's demographic barely existed. Minimal investment where they actually engaged. Files 4 through 7 were equally elegant disasters. A social media strategy that would trigger immediate backlash. Influencer partnerships with creators whose values opposed everything Zenith represented. Retail experience concepts that contradicted their store layouts. And a pricing model that ignored their entire competitive advantage. But here is the beautiful part. I built each file with my naming conventions and my digital signature embedded in metadata with timestamps, showing creation dates weeks before Clara even joined. Then I created parallel versions, the real ones, stored in password-protected folders with comprehensive documentation of every decision, every insight, and every strategic rationale. I also started creating a digital trail, leveraging federal laws like Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, which protects exclusive rights and copyrighted works. Every time Clara accessed the dummy folders, my background script logged it. When she downloaded files, I knew. When she renamed them to strip my initials, I had screenshots. I used a simple tracking script. Nothing sophisticated, nothing that would alert information technology, just enough to build an undeniable timeline. This was not just a trap, it was a carefully constructed legal snare. In California, Penal Code Section 470 defines forgery as fraudulently altering or presenting documents as one's own, and Clara was walking right into it. Clara took the bait instantly. Within 2 hours of receiving credentials, she was downloading everything. By the next morning, I watched her present my corrupted frameworks in the team's stand-up. "I worked late last night developing these strategic approaches," she announced, pointing to visualizations I had created 4 weeks earlier. "The insights are groundbreaking." James from Brand Strategy raised his hand. "That positioning seems counterintuitive. Are we really targeting that demographic?" Clara's smile remained flawless. "That is exactly the conventional thinking we need to challenge. Sometimes strategy requires bold moves that make people uncomfortable." She advanced to the next slide, my intentionally disastrous media plan. "But look at these channel opportunities. This is why Zenith hired us." I maintained a neutral expression, taking notes like a dutiful team member. Internally, I was documenting every false claim, every misrepresentation, every moment she passed off my sabotaged work as her own revolutionary thinking. The following month became a careful dance. Clara would demand new strategies, always urgent, always last minute. I would provide them from my special folder. Each file is a precisely crafted weapon waiting to backfire. She started sharing them directly with Zenith's leadership, attaching her name as lead strategist, occasionally remembering to credit me in footnotes as research support. The most revealing moment came during a Thursday afternoon check-in. Clara was showing Oliver our progress using my dummy files exclusively. "The strategic work is exceptional," Oliver said, glancing at me. "Julian, your analytical depth really shows through here." "Actually," Clara interjected smoothly, "while Julian provided some initial data gathering, I have completely reimagined the strategic direction. This represents a fundamentally different approach than what we typically use." I smiled. Clara has definitely put her unique perspective on things. Let her claim it. Let her own it. Let her build her entire reputation on strategies that would fail spectacularly under real-world pressure. Every presentation made her more committed, more invested in the fiction. She could not reverse course without admitting she had been presenting garbage for weeks. The preliminary review with Zenith was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Clara had already sent them the complete deck for advanced review. There was no turning back. The fuse was burning, and I had front-row seats to the explosion. The genius of a well-executed trap is watching the victims spring it on themselves. Over the next 5 weeks, I became Clara's most dedicated supporter, at least superficially. When she needed files by 7 in the morning, I had them delivered by 6:30. When she demanded last-minute revisions for client calls, I complied with a smile. Every interaction was meticulously documented, timestamped, and archived. My evidence system was forensically precise. Screenshots of every message where Clara claimed ownership. Just finalized the brand positioning strategy, found some game-changing directions. Screen recordings of team meetings where she presented my dummy files. I have developed a revolutionary approach to market segmentation. Email threads where she forwarded my work to Zenith executives with her signature as lead strategic director. The most incriminating evidence came from Clara herself. She created a shared folder called CM Zenith Deliverables, where she stored her work, my corrupted files with metadata stripped, and her name added to headers. She did not realize our system maintained version histories, showing the original files copied from my folders, complete with timestamps proving I created them weeks before she arrived. I maintained 2 parallel workflows. While feeding Clara the poison pills, I built the real strategy in secured folders only I could access. The actual Zenith analysis told a completely different story. Genuine market opportunities, authentic positioning strategies, and actionable insights that would legitimately transform their brand. Every framework was documented, every assumption explained, and every recommendation transparent. This was my real work, my insurance policy waiting backstage. Clara's confidence grew exponentially. She started excluding me from meetings, telling Oliver I was better utilized in strategic development. She began speaking at industry panels about her innovative approach to brand transformation. She even submitted a case study proposal to a marketing summit featuring frameworks pulled directly from my sabotaged files. The information technology logs revealed everything. Clara accessed my dummy folders 61 times in 5 weeks. She downloaded every file, some repeatedly. She tried renaming them, reformatting them, and even recreating them in new templates. But the digital fingerprints remained. Every action created breadcrumbs leading back to those original corrupted files in Zenith Final Deliverables JV. 4 days before the big presentation, I overheard Clara on a call with Zenith's chief marketing officer. "The strategic framework is absolutely bulletproof," she assured him. "I have personally validated every element, every recommendation. This is..." She was standing outside my office, speaking loud enough to ensure I heard. A power move, broadcasting that she was taking full credit. I opened my backup folder and reviewed the real strategy one final time. Clean, accurate, actionable, everything Zenith actually needed. Then I examined what Clara would be presenting. A $35 million catastrophe waiting to happen, built on flawed assumptions and impossible strategies. The gap between reality and her fiction was insurmountable. That evening, I forwarded every piece of evidence from my work computer to my personal accounts. The logs, the screenshots, the email trails, the version histories, everything. Then, I sent a comprehensive email to my personal attorney outlining the situation and attaching key documentation. "For your records," I wrote, "in case questions arise about the integrity of strategic work presented to clients. This could constitute a breach of fiduciary duty and unauthorized use of proprietary models." On Monday, Clara sent a company-wide email. "Excited to present our groundbreaking Zenith strategy to their executive team tomorrow. This showcases Horizon's next-level strategic capabilities." She copied the entire leadership team, the advisory board, and even some key investors. She was all in, reputation staked, completely unaware she was about to present 7 files of meticulously crafted fiction to executives who knew their brand intimately. I spent Monday quietly preparing. I wore my best suit, the navy one I had bought for interviews but never worn to work. I tested my laptop's presentation mode, ensuring the real strategy would display flawlessly. I printed hard copies of the documentation trail, organized chronologically in a leather portfolio. Clara stopped by my office at 4:30. "You will be at the Zenith meeting tomorrow, right? In case they have technical questions." Her tone suggested this was a directive, not a request. "Would not miss it," I replied. "I will be right there." She nodded, satisfied. "Good, though I doubt I will need backup. The work speaks for itself." Yes, I thought, watching her stride away in her designer boots. Yes, it absolutely does. The Zenith conference room was a monument to athletic achievement. Championship trophies in glass cases, motivational quotes on exposed brick walls, and a table that could seat 20 executives comfortably. 17 people filed in, including Richard Caldwell, the chief marketing officer whose questions would determine our fate, and Victoria Kensington, Zenith's chief executive officer, a former professional athlete who had built a retail empire through relentless discipline. Clara arrived at 8:30, 15 minutes early, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. She was all confident handshakes and practiced small talk, working the room like a political candidate. I sat in the second row as promised, laptop ready, watching her set up with the casual arrogance of someone who had never had their strategy questioned in real time. Oliver and 2 other Horizon partners took seats along the sidewall. The tension was palpable. $35 million tends to sharpen everyone's attention. Clara clicked through her opening slides, all polish and promises, building toward the strategy that would either seal the deal or sink the ship. Slide 1. Beautiful company overview, mission alignment, and all the terminology executives appreciate. Slide 2. Still safe, industry analysis pulled from public research, nothing that could expose the corruption underneath. Slide 3. Consumer journey mapping, impressive graphics, logical flow. She was building confidence, setting the stage. Slide 4. High-level findings, vague enough to sound insightful without committing to specifics. Then came Slide 5. Brand positioning strategy, the $35 million slide. The moment the positioning map appeared, I saw Richard Caldwell's expression shift. The strategy targeted suburban retirees for a brand that had deliberately pivoted to urban professionals 4 years ago. "Can you explain this demographic focus?" Richard asked, his voice neutral, but his eyes skeptical. Clara's smile never wavered. "Our research shows untapped potential in the older segment. These recommendations are strategically sound." "Strategically sound?" Victoria leaned forward. "We abandoned that market because it did not align with our brand. We have invested millions repositioning toward urban professionals." Slide 6. The Authentic Lifestyle Campaign. Richard pulled out his tablet. "Your brief emphasizes a slower pace of life. Our brand is about pushing limits and athletic achievement. These are opposites." "That is the paradigm shift we are proposing," Clara said smoothly, though her hand trembled on the remote. Slide 7. The Media Plan. Now even junior executives were frowning. A whisper reached Richard. He nodded grimly. Ms. Montgomery, the chief marketing officer, said, ice in his voice, "Are you seriously allocating 40% of our digital budget to outdated web portals and legacy networks? Our audience is on modern social platforms. The data clearly shows." Clara started. "The data shows nothing clear." Victoria cut in. "This would waste millions targeting people who do not buy our products." The room erupted. "Why are lifestyle bloggers in the influencer plan when we partner with professional athletes? How can you suggest boutique retail experiences when we run large format stores? Are you really proposing to compete on price for a premium brand?" Clara floundered, reciting buzzwords about disruption. Each answer sank her deeper. Then Victoria asked the killing question. "Do you even understand our brand at all?" Silence. 17 eyes locked on Clara. Her mouth open-closed, nothing came out. Richard's voice was quiet, lethal. "Mr. Vance, do you have anything to contribute?" All heads turned. Clara went pale. I stood, smoothing my suit. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, I do." My laptop was already open, real strategy loaded, grounded in truth, not fiction. "May I?" I held up a cable. Victoria nodded. "Please." As I passed Clara, frozen in place, I felt 12 years of invisibility dissolve. The screen flickered, her fantasy vanished, reality appeared. Urban professionals 25 to 40, precisely for whom Zenith had repositioned. "This aligns with your evolution," I said, voice steady. "Returning to older markets would contradict millions in investment and confuse your core audience." Richard leaned in. "These demographics match our internal data exactly." I walked through the real campaign, professional athletes, not lifestyle bloggers, large format retail, premium pricing, digital spend on performance platforms. Every recommendation is rooted in their actual data. 50 minutes later, the room was engaged, taking notes and asking smart questions. This was strategy as it should be, honest, rigorous, and collaborative. Finally, Victoria raised a hand. "Mr. Vance, if you had this, why were we shown that?" She gestured to Clara, still rooted by the wall. I pulled up a folder. Transparency matters. Timestamps, access logs, email trails. The flawed files were internal drafts, never client-ready. They were accessed without authorization and presented as final work. This is a clear violation of intellectual property and professional ethics. Richard scrolled on his tablet. "These match what we received. The metadata was altered, poorly. And here," I added, showing message histories, "is the full chain of custody, showing who built what and when ownership was claimed." Silence, except for the air conditioning humming. I laid out the proof like a prosecutor, calm, factual, undeniable. From the wall, Oliver finally spoke, voice tight with fury. "Julian, why did you not escalate this internally?" I met his gaze steadily. "I did document everything internally, but my concerns about strategic integrity have historically been undervalued. I believe the client deserved to see the truth. Furthermore, under the worker adjustment and retraining notification principles, a company must manage its workforce ethically, but in this case, the theft of my work constituted a hostile takeover of my intellectual property." Victoria stood. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need a brief recess." Mr. Vance, please stay. The rest of you, her eyes lingered on Clara, wait outside. As the room emptied, Clara finally spoke. This is a setup. He deliberately, Mrs. Montgomery, Victoria cut in. I suggest you use this time to consider your position very carefully. Once alone with the Zenith team, Victoria's tone softened. That was quite a risk. My job is to provide accurate strategy, I said. I could not let you make $35 million decisions based on fiction. Richard Caldwell looked up from his laptop. 18 years in this business, and I have rarely seen someone put their career on the line for integrity. I want him running this project. Victoria nodded. Can you deliver what you just showed us? Yes, but I will need real authority, a real team, and direct access to your data and people. Done. She stood and extended her hand. Shall we invite them back? When the Horizon team returned, Victoria's message was clear. We are moving forward with one condition: Julian Vance leads, non-negotiable. Clara's face went pale. She had built her entire presentation on poisoned files and now had nowhere to hide. Back at the office, news had already spread. Clara was gone, escorted out by security. Oliver stayed behind to manage the fallout. By 3 in the afternoon, Oliver announced in an all-hands meeting, Julian Vance is now director of brand strategy. Clara Montgomery is no longer with the company. No explanation, just facts. For the first time in 12 years, I was not invisible. Colleagues I had never spoken to sought me out, not for favors but for collaboration. Others quietly shared their own stories of stolen credit. I was not alone. I was just the first to fight back with receipts. By Friday, I had assembled a real team, strategists who cared about substance, not self-promotion. The work flowed. Zenith was thrilled. 4 weeks later, an email popped up. Clara Montgomery. Can we meet? I owe you an explanation. I typed one word. No. She wrote 3 more times. I did not reply. Some bridges should stay burned. 6 months on, the campaign launched on time, under budget. It drove a 14% lift in their core demographic and saved $2 million in retail operations. Victoria sent a handwritten note praising the team. It is framed in my new office, the corner one with river views. Clara's profile briefly listed a no-name startup. Then it went dark. The industry does not forget spectacular failures, especially when they involve misleading clients. I published a paper, Strategic Integrity and Brand Development. It won at the Marketing Summit, the same one to which Clara had tried to submit my dummy frameworks. That night, I opened a new folder. Fourth Quarter Strategic Initiative JV. My initials front and center. No traps this time, just honest work. My phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Glad we have someone who actually understands brands. I smiled, saved my work, and headed home. The invisible man was gone. In his place stood someone who had learned the real rules of corporate survival. Document everything, trust carefully, and if someone steals your work, make sure they are stealing exactly what they deserve. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated, drop a comment. What city are you located in? And if you have ever faced a credit-stealing colleague, how did you handle it? Let us talk below.